Welcome back, everyone. Let me play some music. I think that'll do just fine. Yes, fine. Last time we did, I believe, chapters 5 and 6, if I recall correctly, from Your Christianity. And now we're going to be doing the next ones, I believe. Let's look at the contents. Yeah, 5 and 6, because we started the new book, and that's what we did last time. So now we're going to be reading the second book of it, or book 2 of it, chapters 2 and 3, but I'm just going to call it, obviously, chapters 7 and 8, right? Oh, yeah, 7 and 8. In the actual YouTube video. But so let's get to the page 47. Yo, why are they so far down? 30, 40. No way, that should be. We're at the first chapter of the second book. Okay, rival conceptions of God. Now we just need to get to part 2. Okay, here we go. Yeah. The invasion. Very well then, atheism is too simple, and I will tell you another view that is also too simple. It is the view I call Christianity and water. The view which simply says there is a good God in heaven and everything is all right, leaving out all the difficult and terrible doctrines about sin and hell and the devil and the redemption. Both these are boys' philosophies. What does that mean? It is no good asking for a simple religion. After all, real things are not simple. They look simple, but they are not. The table that I am sitting at looks simple, but ask a scientist to tell you what it is really made of, and about the atoms and how the light waves rebound off of them, how they hit my eyes and what they do to the optic nerve and what it does to my brain. And of course, you find that what we call seeing a table lands you in mysterious and complications which you can hardly get to the end of. A child saying a child's prayer looks simple, and if you are content to stop there, well and good. But if you are not, and the modern world usually is not, if you want to go on and ask what is really happening, then you must be prepared for something difficult. If we ask for something more than simplicity, it is silly then to complain that the something more is not simple. Very true. Very often, however, this silly procedure is adopted by people who are not silly, but who consciously or unconsciously want to destroy Christianity. Such people put up a version of Christianity suitable for a child of 6 and make that the object of their attack. When you try to explain the Christian doctrine as it is really held by an instructed adult, then they complain that you are making their heads turn around and that it is all too complicated, and that if they really were a god, they are sure he would have made religion simple, because simplicity is so beautiful, etc. You must be on your guard against these people, for they will change their ground every minute and only waste your time. Notice too, their idea of God making religion simple as if religion were something God invented, and not his statement to us of certain quite unalterable facts about his own nature. Besides, being complicated, reality in my experience is usually odd. It is not neat, not obvious, not what you expect. For instance, when you have grasped that the Earth and the other planets all go around the sun, you would naturally expect that all the planes were made to match all that equal distance from each other, say, or distance that regularly increases or of the same size, or else getting bigger or smaller as you go further from the sun. In fact, you find no rhyme or reason that we can see about either the size or the distances, and some of them have one moon, one has 4, and one has 2. Some have none, and one has a ring. This is written really confusingly. Reality, in fact, is usually something you could not have guessed. That is one of the reasons I believe Christianity. It is a religion you could not have guessed. If it offered us just the kind of universe we had always expected, I should feel we were making it up. But in fact, it is not the sort of thing anyone would make up. It has just that queer twist about it the real things have. So let us leave behind all these boys' philosophies, these oversimple answers. The problem is not simple, and the answer is not going to be simple either. I think I know what he means by boys' philosophy now. Just a young, naive version of it. What is the problem? A universe that contains much that is obviously bad and apparently meaningless, but containing creatures like ourselves who know that it is bad and meaningless. There are only 2 views that face all the facts. One is the Christian view, that this is a good world that has gone wrong, but still remains at the memory of what ought to have been. The other is a view called dualism. Dualism means the belief that there are 2 equal and independent powers at the back of everything, one of them good and the other bad, and that this universe is the battlefield in which they fight out an endless war. I personally think that next to Christianity, dualism is the manliest and most sensible creed on the market, but it has a catch in it. The 2 powers, or spirits or gods, the good one and the bad one, are supposed to be quite independent. They both existed from all eternity, neither of them made the other, neither of them has any more right than the other to call itself God, Each presumably thinks it is good and thinks the other one is bad. One of them likes hatred and cruelty, and the other loves and mercy. The other one likes love and mercy, and each backs its own view. Now, what do we mean when we call one of them the good power and the other the bad power? Either we are merely saying that we happen to prefer the one to the other, like preferring beer to cider, or else we are saying that whatever the two powers think about it, and whichever we humans at the moment happen to like, one of them is actually wrong. Actually, mistaken. It regarding itself as good. Now, if we mean merely that we happen to prefer the first, then we must give up talking about good and evil at all. For good means what you ought to prefer, quite regardless of what you happen to like at any given moment. If being good meant simply joining the side you happen to fancy for no real reason, then good would not deserve to be called good. So we must mean that one of the two powers is actually wrong and the other actually right. But the moment you say that, you are putting into the universe a third thing in addition to the two powers, some law or standard or rule of good which one of the powers conforms to and the other fails to conform to. This is very similar to what he was talking about before, about this rule that we assume is real. But since the two powers are judged by this standard, and then this standard or the being who made this standard is farther back and higher up than either of them, and he will be the real God. In fact, what we meant by calling them good and bad turns out to be that one of them is in a right relation to the real ultimate God and the other is in a wrong relation to him. The same point can be made in a different way. If dualism is true, then the bad power must be a being who likes badness for its own sake. But in reality, we have no experience of anyone liking badness just because it is bad. The nearest we can get to it is in cruelty, but in real life, people are cruel for one of two reasons. Either because they are sadists, that is because they have a sexual perversion which makes cruelty a cause of sensual pleasure to them, or else for the sake of something they are going to get out of it, money or power or safety. But pleasure, money, power, and safety are all, as far as they go, good things. The badness consists in pursuing them by the wrong method, or in the wrong way, or too much. I do not mean, of course, that the people who do this are not desperately wicked. I do mean that wickedness, when you examine it, turns out to be the pursuit of some good in the wrong way. You can be good for the mere sake of goodness. You cannot be bad for the mere sake of badness. You can do a kind action when you are not feeling kind and when it gives you no pleasure, simply because kindness is right. But no one ever did a cruel action simply because cruelty is wrong, only because cruelty was pleasant or useful to him. In other words, badness cannot succeed even in being bad in the same way in which goodness is good. Goodness is, so to speak, itself. Goodness is, so to speak, itself. Badness is only spoiled goodness, and there must be something good first before it can be spoiled. Okay, I think I get what he's saying. We call sadism a sexual perversion, but you must first have the idea of a normal sexuality before you can talk of it being perverted. And you can see which is the perversion because you can explain that from the perverted. You can explain the perverted from the normal, and cannot explain the normal from the perverted. It follows that this bad power, who is supposed to be on an equal footing with the good power and to love badness in the same way as the good power loves goodness, is a mere bogey in order to be the bad. He must have good things to want and then to pursue in the wrong way. He must have impulses which were originally good in order to be able to pervert them. But if he is the bad, he cannot supply himself either with good things to desire or with good impulses to pervert. He must be getting both from the good power, and if so, then he is not independent. He is the part of the good power's world. He was made either by the good power or by some power above them both. Okay, that's the end of it. To put it more simply still, to be bad, he must exist and have intelligence and will. But existence, intelligence, and will are in themselves good. Therefore, he must be gaining them from the good power. Even to be bad, he must borrow or steal from his opponent. And do you now begin to see why Christianity has always said that the devil is a fallen angel? That is not a mere story for the children. It is a real recognition of the fact that evil is a parasite, not an original thing. The powers which enable evil to carry on are powers given to it by goodness. All the things which enable a bad man to be effectively bad are in themselves good things. Resolution, cleverness, good looks, existence itself. That is why dualism, in a strict sense, will not work. But I freely admit that real Christianity, as distinct from Christianity and water, goes much nearer to dualism than people think. One of the things that surprised me when I first read the New Testament seriously was that it talked so much about a dark power in the universe, a mighty evil spirit who was held to be the power behind death and disease and sin. The difference is that Christianity thinks that this dark power is created by God and was good when he was created, and what's wrong. Christianity agrees with dualism that this universe is at war, but it does not think that this is a war between independent powers. It thinks it is a civil war, a rebellion, and that we are living in a part of the universe occupied by the rebel. Enemy-occupied territory, that is what this world is. Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed, you might say landed in disguise, and is calling us to take part in a great campaign of sabotage. When you go to church, you are really listening in to the secret wireless from our friend. That is why the enemy is so anxious to prevent us from going. He does by playing on our conceit and laziness and intellectual snobbery. I know someone will ask me, do you really mean at this time of day to reintroduce your old friend, the devil hoofs and horns and all? Do you really mean at this time of day to reintroduce our old friend, the devil, hoofs and horns and all? Well, what time of day has to do with it, I do not know, and I am not particular about the hooves and the horns. But in other respects, my answer is yes, I do. I do not claim to know anything about this personal appearance. If anybody really wants to know him better, I would say to that person, don't worry, if you really want to, you will. Whether you like it or not, whether you'll like it when you do is another question. That might have been the hardest thing to read and conceptualize, I feel, out of all these chapters I've read so far. That's that chapter. Shocking alternative. Before we get into the next chapter, like last time, I kind of want to do not really a breakdown, but kind of a breakdown. So, like I said, that was actually really insanely hard to read, but I kind of get the gist of what he's saying and the idea of this other proposed dualness idea. In terms of, it's not really quite a religion, but it is kind of that, or like philosophy and way of looking at the world, where you think that there's good and evil. You can almost think of it like the dark side of the force and the light side of the force, right? And the force is just a thing that exists in the universe, almost like air and like matter itself. But that then he goes to explain, and it's like I said before, it's similar to what he's saying, where you're assuming these things about them, like the rule of like, oh, there's like some higher moral law thing above quote unquote good and evil, or this good side and evil side, which is also kind of not the case when you actually start to break down on this weird like not metaphorical, what's the word, whatever it may be, when you start to break it down to this very specific, detailed, definitionally matters process, where you're saying, okay, the bad side and good side are working in hand in some way, whereas what they're just independent. And when he says independent, he just kind of means separate. So the good is all good and no bad, but the bad is all bad and no good. But in reality, it's just saying that the bad can only process and be because the good exists. And I know I'm hearing out loud and it does sound weird, but to actually kind of explain, I think, a little better, or in layman's terms for people like me, I think what he's basically saying is, it's kind of a classic argument, is that evil is only evil when you have a good to compare it to. So this good or overlying power, what we would call God, our Lord Jesus Christ, everything is either good or bad in comparison to him or his law. And so the devil, Satan, us, our sin, all these things are evil and bad because it's in opposition to and indirect accordance, whatever. It's the opposite direction of what God and Jesus is wanting us to do and telling us to do. It's the opposite of what they prefer and want, which also, right, if God, Jesus, whatever, if they are the owner, creator of the universe, it is their world to enact and say what is right and wrong. They lay the groundwork and the rules, and we just have to follow them. And whether or not we do is whether or not we are bad or good. That's kind of basically what I got. Like I said, this is extremely hard to read. And this book is fairly old. I think also these individual documents or books themselves are extremely old, right? He mentions, like, I think, or alludes to like World War II, which is, I this comes from like the 60s or something, but I could be totally off on this. But I think you kind of get it in parts what he's saying, but he doesn't make it easy, at least with that chapter. Okay, now we're gonna go to the next one. This will probably be it. Let me check the time. Yeah, only 14 minutes. Okay, this is probably 30 minutes. Chapter 3. The shocking alternative. Christians then believe that an evil power has made himself for the present the prince of this world, and, of course, that raises problems. Is this state of affairs in accordance with God's will, or not? If it is, he is a strange God, you will say. And if it is not, how can anything happen contrary to the will of a being with absolute power? This, I think I understand what he's saying. This is good. That was very simple. I can understand that. But anyone who has been in authority knows how a thing can be in accordance with your own will in one way and not in another. It may be quite sensible for a mother to say to the children, I am not going to go and make you tidy the schoolroom every night. You've got to learn to keep it tidy on your own. Then she goes up one night and finds a teddy bear and the ink and the French grammar all lying in the grate. That's how you can tell this is old. Or maybe he's just British. That is against her will. She would prefer the children to be tidy, but on the other hand, it is her will which has left the children free to be untidy. The same thing arises in any regiment or trade union or school regiment. You make a thing voluntary and then half the people do not do it. That is not what you willed, but your will has made it possible. I'm just reading it bad. It is probably the same in the universe. God created things which had free will. That means creatures which can go either wrong or right. Some people think that they can imagine a creature which was free but had no possibility of going wrong. I cannot. If a thing is free to be good, it is also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give them free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes it possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A mouth of automata, of creatures that worked like machines, would hardly be worth creating. The happiness which God designs for us, his higher creatures, is the happiness of being freely. The happiness of being freely, voluntarily united to him and to each other in an ecstasy of love and delight, compared with which the most rapturous love between a man and a woman on this earth is mere milk and water, and for that they must be free. I do think I know what he's saying here. Of course, God knew what would happen if they used their freedom the wrong way, apparently. He thought it would be the risk. Perhaps we feel inclined to disagree with him, but there is a difficulty about disagreeing with God. He is the source from which all reasoning power comes from. You cannot be right and he wrong, any more than a stream can rise higher than its own source. When you are arguing against him, you are arguing against the very power that makes you able to argue it at all. It is like cutting off the branch you are sitting on. If God thinks this state of war in the universe a price worth paying for free will, that is, for making a live world in which creatures can do real good or harm and something of real importance can happen. Instead of a toy world which can only moves play when he pulls the strings, they make it is when he pulls the strings. Then we may take it at it is what it is worth playing. Then we take it. Why are there two it's? Whatever. When we have understood about free will, we shall see how silly it is to ask. As somebody once asked me, why did God make a creature of such rotten stuff that it went wrong? The better stuff a creature is made of, the cleverer and stronger, then freer it is, then the better it will be if it goes right. But also, the worse it will be if it goes wrong. A cow cannot be very good or very bad. A dog can be both better and worse. A child better and worse still. An ordinary man still more so. A man of genius still more so. A superhuman spirit best or worst of all. How did the dark power go wrong? Here, no doubt, we ask a question to which human beings cannot give an answer with certainty. A reasonable and traditional guess, based on our own experience of going wrong, can, however, be offered. The moment you have a self at all, there is a possibility of putting yourself first, wanting to be the center, wanting to be God, in fact. That was the sin of Satan, and that was the sin he taught the human race. Some people think the fall of man has something to do with sex, but that is a mistake. The story in the book of Genesis rather suggests that some corruption in our sexual nature followed the fall and was its result, not its cause. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods, could set up on their own as they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside God, apart from God, happiness for themselves outside of God, apart from God. This is really weirdly worded and written. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all that we call human history: money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery, the long terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. The reason why it can never succeed in this: God invented us as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on petrol, and it would not only properly run on anything else. Now God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. That is the key to history. Terrific energy is expanded, civilizations are built up, excellent institutions devised, but each time something goes wrong. Some fatal flaw always brings the selfish and cruel people to the top, and it all slides back into misery and ruin. In fact, the machine conks, it seems to start up all right and runs a few yards, and then it breaks down. They are trying to run it on the wrong juice. That is what Satan has done to us humans. And what did God do? First of all, he left us conscience, the sense of right and wrong, and all through history, there have been people trying, some of them very hard to obey it. Some of them very hard. None of them ever quite succeeded. Secondly, he sent the human race what I call good dreams. I mean those queer stories scattered all through the heathenry? What? All through the heathen religions about a God who dies and comes to life again, and by his death has somehow given new life to men. Thirdly, he selected one particular people and spent several centuries hammering into their heads the sort of God he was. Yet there was only one of him, and that he cared about the right conduct. Those people were the Jews. And the Old Testament gives an account of the hammering process. Then comes the real shock. Among these Jews, there suddenly turns up a man who goes about talking as if he was God. He claims to forgive sins. He says he has always existed. He says he is coming to judge the world at the end of time. Now let us get this clear. Among pantheists, like the Indians, anyone might say that he was a part of God or one with God. There would be nothing very odd about it. But this man, since he was a Jew, could not mean that kind of God. God in their language meant the being outside the world, who had made it and was infinitely... who was infinitely different from everything else. And when you have grasped that, you will see that what this man said was, quite simply, the most shocking thing that has ever been uttered by human lips. Tell me about it. One part of the claim tends to slip past us unnoticed because we have heard it often that we no longer see it what it amounts to. I mean the claim to forgive sins. Any sins. Now unless the speaker is God, this is really so preposterous as to be comic, saying it's comedic. We can all understand how a man forgives offenses against himself. You tread on my toes, and I forgive you. You stole my money, and I forgive you. But what should we make of a man himself, unrobbed and untrodden on, who announced that he forgave you for treading on the other man's toes and stealing other men's money? Asinine. What? Is that how you pronounce that word? I've never seen this word in text. Asinine fatuity is the kindest description we should give of his conduct. Yeah, this is what Jesus did. He told people that their sins were forgiven and never wants to consult all the other people whom their sins had undoubtedly injured. He hesitantly behaved as if he was the party chief concerned, the person chiefly offended in all offenses. This makes sense only if he really was the God whose laws are broken and whose love is wounded in every sin. In the mouth of any speaker who is not God, these words would simply what I can only regard as a silliness and conceit unrivaled by any other character in history. Yet, and this is the strange significant thing, even his enemies, when they read the Gospels, do not usually get the impression of silliness and conceit. Still less do unprejudiced readers. Christ says that he is humble and meek, and we believe him, not noticing that if he were merely a man, humility and meekness are the very last characteristics we could attribute to some of his sayings. I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the real foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That's the quote and what we're all arguing on, you know? That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said these sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronism nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that part open to us. He did not intend to. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Okay, thank God. Oh, that was again a little hard to read there as well. I don't know what's happening. I know I can read this pretty fine. But okay, that was a really good chapter. I like that one there. The second half more so. The first half was like a little wonky. But to kind of go over it, and what's actually insanely good, is kind of he was basically talking about what I've thought about before and was kind of sort of just mentioning halfway. In as much as that saying, because he is God, the creator of the universe, of everything, he has full and final say and authority over everything. So these people that will say, kind of make moral claims or say certain things are basically just like, they're challenging his authority or trying to say that they would do a better job as God, whether it be like, he says, like making human beings, and questioning like, oh, if I were God, why does he allow these things to happen? Why do he make us bad? Why do he make us known who would sin and go against him? All these things, which is kind of against the whole point, or at the very least, just not the point at all. Because also, as he says, right, free will brings up power, free love, or like actual love and actual hatred. Not free love. We don't do that here. And also, what he's saying there is actually very important to a lot of people, where they'll say, "Oh, why did God make free will?" That's basically what they're asking. Like they'll say, like, "Oh, if he knew great evil would happen in the world and history, not just in us individually, but across all space and time, basically, then why create mankind at all, knowing that such evil and bad things would happen?" And basically, to him, because he said so and he's God and it's his world, but also because that's the only way actual, real, true love, compassion, and dedication can come from. And he says that, and he uses old English wording, right? He calls them automatons and robots. But it's basically saying, if God just created us to be perfectly loving and great and good, like he kind of wanted us to be in the first place, then we would just be that. We would just be robots that just constantly worship and bow down to him like it's in our programming without any will at all. But with free will, we're able to actually choose love, but we're also able to actually choose evil and hatred and malice and all these things, which is wild. That's also, I like the analogy he also brings when he mentions Satan and Lucifer, where it was him thinking he could be a better god, or pride in himself, thinking that he can do things better, that he is on par with or is similar to God. I like that, bringing that up. That's just really, really good. Yeah, and I do cut. It was a bit weird when he just like kind of abruptly cut and change the subject in here. Yeah, but I do like, like we have no like real way of questioning the authority of God, saying like arguing against him is kind of meaningless and powerless because we're in his world. You're in my world now. How did Dark Power go? Where that cannot be very good at very bad. Or is child better still? Yeah. Oh, that's that. Okay, I was looking at the wrong thing there. Speak as itself, only bad spelling there must be. Yeah, I think it was really good. I like that one, except for reading it. The reading was a little bad because the other chapters weren't as weird with their choice of highbrow big words that I just haven't seen in a while. And while I don't read a whole lot compared to the most people. I read more than average, but I don't read a whole lot. So that's probably why those words were a little wonky to me to look at. But this was great. Thank you all for joining me today, this time here. God bless you guys. Have a good one. May God bless you, your family, all these things, everything that you're doing. Go and do his will. Love you guys. See y'all next time.